Hey everyone, welcome back to the It's a Mind Game podcast. My name is Jade. I'm a personal trainer and mindset coach specializing in HAED and female specific training protocols. Today, I'm joined by the incredible Jacqueline, who is a psychotherapist specializing in eating disorders and body image. If you're a long-term listener, you'll be well aware of who this incredible woman is. And if you're brand new to the podcast, well, you are in for an absolute treat. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you very much for having me back, Jade, and loyal listeners. It's a joy to be returning for another conversation.
I feel like we really cherry pick the nitty-gritty parts of eating disorders and exercise compulsion, which makes them, I think, such a delight for some of the listeners because it's understanding things that surface level make sense. But then when you dive into it, you go, oh, wow, it's just unlocking all these little chambers. So knowing about unlocking chambers, we're going to unlock some body image chambers today. We were kind of having a little debrief before this podcast and kind of highlighting how people will very commonly speak about body image, and it's quite a broad perception versus breaking down into the different elements that make up body image. So I might start with the first one of four and then we'll break it down. But first up, the way you see your body, so that perception of body image. How is it that this can be relevant to women experiencing eating disorders? And what is, I guess, some things we should be aware of with our perception of our body, knowing that there's some ducks that aren't quite lined up?
Perceptual body image is really confusing. It's probably one of the most complicated of the different pillars of what contributes to making up what body image is, because it's really in the interpretation and the processing of the body image experience. It can be the interoceptive experience of how we feel about the feedback we perceive we're getting about our body. And that could be so different based in different situations. For example, the same body could be perceived differently in different cultures, and then we're getting feedback differently. In fact, interestingly, as it seems, everyone except you and me, Jade, is in Europe at the moment, it would seem.
Notice that.
Have you noticed that? They're all over. We didn't get the memo. And some of my clients are coming back and telling me how differently they had feedback about their bodies overseas, that different bodies were being highlighted as more valuable, more desirable, and feedback about their, in these cases, more recovered bodies was actually quite an exciting, liberating experience for them, because that's not how they felt based on the feedback in back home in Australia, where their weight loss had been heralded, and then their recovery body, they could only compare to that initial compliment on the weight loss. So the perception was, well, if you liked me like that, you'll like me less like this. And seeing the contrast in a different culture is a really interesting example of perceptual body image, where it is ultimately our interpretation of what culture and external feedback is giving us about our body. And that's really important to highlight, because perception is very subjective. It isn't factual. It isn't how someone experiences their body image. There isn't a right or wrong. It may not be the same as how you see their body, but it's their experience of how they interpret the valuing of their body in the environment they're in.
Mm-hmm. And such a reality check like that can be so, I guess, liberating, because if you have been born up in a particular culture where that weight loss journey has been celebrated, or even an extremely athletic looking body, but let's say for argument's sake, it's athletic looking body that you do have a missing period, like it's not necessarily healthy. And thinking that is always the pinnacle of success. And it feels quite trusted, because you might have had years of confirmation that this is what you should be striving for. And then to go into another country and experience firsthand comments, compliments, or even the confidence of other women it could be, because I hear that a lot as well. It's just like, they were, that classic sort of Brazilian kind of body with the hips and the bottom and the nice breasts, and and then they go over there, and that is something that personally might make that woman feel unsettled, because it's, oh no, I can't be curvaceous, like I actually like to be square and whatnot. And then they go to another country and just experience all these other women just showing up as themselves and so confident and glamorous, and noticing the confidence of that woman, but also, I guess, I don't want to say praise, but there's the persona of the culture, I guess you could say, like that's the celebrated body. And not saying that there's a wrong or right, but just knowing that we can be so locked into we've gotten it right, and then we get picked up and put somewhere else, and it throws that reality on its head, and it makes you question, well, hang on, if we can be right in both worlds, it actually comes down to, well, what's my definition of what makes a healthy and still good looking body? Because I think that kind of gets skewed with the eating disorder talk, where if you've gone through eating disorder recovery and your body's changed shape, that you just have to love it for what it is. But I think that there's some wiggle room in that absolutely prioritizing health is really important, but you're still allowed to take pride in how you look. And if you want to train and look a bit more muscly, you can. And if you don't want to look muscly, you don't have to. And the key there is doing it in a way that benefits your health and not going to the extremes of the past. Have you noticed that conversation pops up with some of the ladies you work with, where it's like, I feel like I just have to give up on my appearance, but it actually really matters to me what I look like and how I show up in the world?
This is really interesting, Jade. I could talk for a long time about this. So
Let's go.
Just pull me up any moment. It's fascinating, and it opens up a lot. Like, I can hear conversations around feminism calling us. I can hear conversations of consent calling us, in terms of, is it like our ideas making us believe that we want to look good? Like, what is that urge? What is the root of it? There's so much philosophically in this, and there is an idea in the recovery world that almost as a stance against diet culture, then the radical opposition to that is opposing curating any type of look that would appeal to any of the parties invested, any of the stakeholders invested in the diet culture industry. So being stereotypically appealing to the male gaze, or pursuing beauty ideals, feels like it's a betrayal of the same, like it's got the same poison in it as what led to the full-blown eating disorder, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a movement, a school of thought, for example, of dressing in a way that wouldn't subscribe to any straight size clothing. So like buying clothing that's one size fits all, because otherwise we're supporting fashion industry that is perpetuating the beauty myths and using underweight models to advertise, etc. And I do understand that point of view, and I very much appreciate when you've been deeply hurt by an industry, that almost allergic reaction to want to reject it as a whole. And I'm really curious about exactly what you've said, and my inkling is there's something more true in what you've offered, that there is space for a curation of self-expression, which is individualized outside of dominant meta-narratives that we're otherwise at risk of being puppeted by and manipulated by. And that's what I mean by consent, is that, for example, like someone wanting to have cosmetic surgery, one way of thinking about that is, well, if that makes her feel better about herself and that's going to give her more confidence, she should go ahead and do that, fully support that. And then another school of thought around that would be, but is it like really her that wants that, or is that the brainwashing of the male gaze and diet culture making her think, well, if I have, let's say, a breast enhancement, I'll be more sexually attractive. That will make me feel more powerful. That's why I want it. And she might have the procedure and feel more confident, but is it for reasons that actually empower her, or does it just give her more, like increase her value on the market almost in a way that disembodies her inherent being? And that's a really interesting debate. I think that's fascinating. But when you were saying, like, if you want to feel more muscular, and I know you've had a background in like, correct me if I'm not using the right terminology, but like sculpting, like body sculpting and
bodybuilding. Yeah.
Bodybuilding, yes.
Yeah.
And that almost the testing of the body's limits from an athletic point of view, of looking physically at what you can curate and create in the body, to me also feels like it could have a real creative expression in it and an individuality in it, that we're then at risk, like most movements and most revolutions, the pendulum swings too far in the other direction, and then we can be brainwashed by the opposite message of saying we're not allowed to care at all, and like wearing anything but tracksuit pants, or putting in an intentional effort to affect your image at all is part of the problem. Or is it maybe something that's different to both of those that becomes the healthiest way of being? Did I dive way too deep?
Yeah, no, I love it. I'm just listening, so I'm like, I just want to make sure I absorb everything. But I like to perceive that, because I honestly find that a lot of the women I attract as clients tend to come to me because they resonate with that idea that, okay, I need to do XYZ in order to restore my health, but I still hold value with a particular lifestyle, with a particular look. And I personally am at peace with that. And a lot of the women that I work with are like, yeah, I feel in alignment with that. And I think personally, the way I see it is, if you're holding true to your values, it's not in a dangerous space. So, and I completely understand that people might disagree with this, so all good. But personally, the way I look at it, especially if you've got women who still want to say, look athletic, like they know that training is important to them mentally, physically, emotionally. It fuels their soul. Let's say it really feels good. That in the past, they may have trained purely to manipulate their physique. That was the only intention. And even though they could do it really, really well, obviously the whiplash of that wasn't beneficial. So if you're looking at, okay, how do I find this middle ground of, I actually like a particular identity and it feels really good for me. How do I make that complement the way I show up in life? So for me, the way I measure it is, I've got my different values put in place where it's like, okay, number one, my health marker takes priority. Like, I need to make sure that I feel well, my period shows up, emotionally, I'm in a good space, and that it's not sort of like my dominant thing of life. It's the cherry on top. Where in the past, my training behaviors and my food was everything, and then everything else was cherries on top. And there was way, way, way more cherries, but I didn't have anything I could intertwine back and forth. Where when I gauge things now, I look at, okay, well, exercise and training is very much the cherry on top of my current life. I still prioritize making sure my health markers show up. And more than any, I prioritize that I can show up as the mother, as the businesswoman, as the daughter, as the wife. I want those hats readily available. And I believe you can have everything, you just can't have it all at once. So in the past, my everything was that lifestyle, and I ticked the box. It was great. But now my middle ground is making sure all of these other things are met, and then the training complements them. And when trying to decipher that, well, what's next for me? I've done the recovery and I don't want to be what I was and subscribe to that ideal, but I also don't want to be what perhaps recovery stories are projected at as well, that like I can show up as anything and anyone and it doesn't matter. The middle is identifying those values and knowing that it has to be your values, not Instagram's values, not your personal trainer's values, your best friend, your boyfriend, it has to be you, which I think that personal development piece is so important, because unless you've got that strength to go, no people pleasing, like literally I'm being selfish about this one, this is just about me, that you can then go, I actually trust myself to, for loss of words, go for a look, because it's actually not just the look. There's actually a whole embodiment around this choice. Does that make sense?
A lot of sense. And what I really hear is the importance of the pursuit becomes the signaling of how safe it is. If it's that, I need my body to look like this, or I can't function, I can't concentrate on anything else, I have to achieve this. Versus it's kind of fun to play with. That's kind of like, there's an empowerment in looking at the influence we can have, just like, because I like to bring it to other realms to kind of test out the efficacy of an idea. And I think if we were playing with different like ways of doing hair, for example, and we sort of were using these different tools and noticing, oh, that creates that effect and this creates this effect, and if I sort of judge it like that afterwards, it does that. And that's kind of funky. That kind of reminds me of like a 70s look, or this kind of reminds me of like a classic old world look, and I might wear it with this dress and that just makes me feel really fun today, or I've got this event on, I might do it like that for that event. We may not be feeling that if our hair didn't work out that day or didn't come together, it might be disappointing because we sort of had an image in mind or a way we wanted to present it. But it is self-expression, it is fun, and it is that influence over something, which, to extend that again, might be something like our home. We might say, oh, I really love like Hampton style houses, and it's not realistic to buy one that's completely Hamptons, like out of a brochure, but I'm going to like tweak this, and like as I buy new items and choose new things, I'm going to lean into that style and develop that as a bit of a goal for the type of look we're going for with the home, because that feels like our family, that feels like the environment that we want to be in. And so if it kind of has a similar feeling to it and equal flexibility to it, where if that piece of furniture in the Hampton style isn't available, it's like disappointing, but it's not the end of the world, then that transfers to the body. Like maybe we didn't gain as much muscle as we hoped, maybe that when we weren't able to tone that part of the body in the way that we envisioned, and it's sort of like, oh well, no, I'll just work with what it landed as, is very different to it feeling like it does in an eating disorder mind space where it's devastating. And the other thing that I was just thinking when you were speaking about it, it feels really important just to say specifically, is that there is no recovered looking body, just like there is no eating disorder looking body. You can't tell if someone has an eating disorder no matter how they look, like how suspicious you are of them. You do not know that they have an eating disorder by looking at them. And you don't know they're recovered by looking at them either. So it doesn't matter how big someone is or not big, or this shape or that shape, or these sorts of clothes or those sorts of clothes, or wearing makeup or not wearing makeup. It doesn't make someone more recovered or less recovered by gauging by appearances. I'd pay more attention to what they're saying and most importantly, how they're feeling. But that just felt really important to highlight.
Yeah, I so love that you brought that up, because, guilty back in the day, and I know it's something that happens a lot with the women we work with as well, is going through Instagram going, I wonder if she's got a period. I wonder if she's having breakfast. I wonder if she says she trains once, but she's really training twice. And you have, I'm going to call it a phase, because I don't think it lasts forever, but there can be that stage. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Personally, I think a lot of it comes from, because you feel tricked from the fitness industry, you're kind of looking to be a bit of a detective, because I believed everything so willingly and with such great intentions, and it led me here. And now I'm confused. So now when I see things, I have to question it all, because sometimes, one, it's just part of the process of healing, I guess, knowing that, okay, we were misled and now we're finding a better path. But also, depending on the stage that you're at, you're looking for someone to confirm you can stay the same, or you're looking for someone to confirm that you're making the right decision because you need change in order to heal. When those kind of chats come forward to you, what's some guidance or a way we can kind of responsibly use social media rather than being the detective, scanning through everything, zooming in photos and placing a story? Because I think that was probably the standout of what you said, of you actually can't tell who's got a disorder, who doesn't, who looks like they've got this or who looks like they doesn't, because it's, we see, and I guess this links into body image, we see an image and then we attach a story to it, hoping we're the closest to the truth, never actually knowing.
Oh, Jade, this is, I'm just like ferociously nodding as you're talking about it. I can relate so much. And I love the word detective. You nailed it. That's exactly what it is. It's a detective phase. And I think it's incredibly common. It's like a disillusionment when you realize, when someone realizes they have an eating disorder and this whole thing they've been going through isn't just being really into fitness or isn't just being really disciplined with food, it's a disorder, and they understand how it's been affecting their life for so long and that it needs to change, but also understand the social components of it, that we do live in a disordered eating society and we live in a diet culture society. Then it can really feel like, one, there's often a phase of wanting to save or recruit others. It's really can be quite fundamentalist, like screaming from the rooftops about diet culture and trying to get your parents to understand and your next door neighbor and like rescue other people can be quite common. But also, and you explained this very well, because eating disorders are so complicated and they're often experienced relationally, they're egosyntonic, it feels like that precious my relation, like it's my eating disorder, it was my way of doing things, it was my body, that was my experience, and it's being taken away from me. Maybe one has agreed to that because they've understood the harm that will come from continuing the behaviors. So they're wanting to get better, but it usually still hurts a lot to let go of that experience. And so when other people seem like they may be still in that experience and they're not acknowledging it and they're pretending they're not really doing it, it can feel, it's almost like a spy, like a spy thing that comes in too, of almost like, I think they're working for the enemy. Like they're pretending that it's training once a day, but I think they're doing more. And I think she's probably not well enough. And I think that one's got an eating disorder. And to your question, I do find people will often come in that phase and say, like, I think my mother has an eating disorder. I think my auntie has an eating disorder. Yes. I think the teacher at school had an eating disorder. I think my sister definitely has an eating disorder. Mm-hmm. And maybe they all do. I mean, we do live in this culture, but it is often this feeling of maybe a little bit like, I shouldn't have to give this up if you're not all giving it up too. And maybe because I went a bit further, it has to be completely taken away from me. And just because you dabbled in it and didn't go somewhere as dangerous, you get to keep it. And that's not fair. That feeling can be really strong. And the first thing that came to mind when you asked me how to navigate regarding social media, and I think by extension, just life, to put it very succinctly, this is a time to really stay in your own lane. That it is just about focusing on you and what you want for you, and only you get to decide. You touched on values earlier. I think it's a time to bring that back. What do you want for you and what's good enough for you in your world right now? And maybe not, they're over there doing something with their body that's harmful or not harmful. We can't know. But if you do that right now, it is going to be harmful, and it is going to come with the costs that you're now aware of. Is that okay by you or not? And just having to continue to come back to make decisions. And of course, social media literacy, just being really aware that people could be posting photos that are old, that are doctored, that are filtered, that
You can't
are
even tell it's
staged.
real
Can't even tell
anymore.
it's real. Like, whether they're like, for example, like a what I eat in a day scenario, those photos could have been taken over the course of a month and then put together like the most beautiful meals that were eaten in that time on the prettiest plates with the nicest cutlery accompanying them. Like, we just have no idea. And I prefer to think that people usually aren't intending on being malicious, but there's a combination of a natural and socialized tendency to present what we've all been encouraged to show, like the more pleasant stories, the things that won't upset people, the things that will give us approval. We've all been trained to do that, particularly as women. So even subconsciously, we'll do that in our social media. And people also have the right to not show private aspects of their life. And if they were having a really hard day, they don't have to show that on social media to prove that they've counted the really good day they had yesterday, or moment where they took a photo and they were smiling and it looked beautiful. They don't owe it to us to have to show then every photo where they're crying, or they're having a fight with their partner, or they're really stressed about something, to protect our mental health. It's our responsibility to realize that it's a moment. And just like when we bump into someone in the street, we all tend to smile and say, how are you? Yeah, good. How you be? Even though we might be having an awful day. And I'm not saying that's a great thing. Like, that's a whole other conversation of why we do that in our society. But it's really like social media is just reflecting the same thing via images and media. And it's for us to realize that there's always more to the story in every iteration of how we witness another life.
Yeah, there's so many words of wisdom in what you've just shared there. And I couldn't help but think, just that example that you gave, how we don't owe it to anybody to show 360 of our world, right? And that's okay. Like, when you think about from a protective front, you pick your tribes with certain things, whether it be sharing your successes, whether it be sharing your sorrows, whether it be sharing your disordered behaviors or disorder. It's normal for us to pick our tribe. So you've got to also assume it's very normal for people to want that even online, because you don't want the influence. Like, if you're a Fitspo and you've got 100,000 followers, you might not want 100,000 people commenting on your stuff going, oh, you shouldn't be sad about that, pull your head out, or oh my gosh, that's awful, you should be way more upset. Like, no one needs that. That's actually not helpful for anybody. It's more, I've got my tribe, I'll run something by them and I'll work it out. But it's a common topic as well with this, but if someone doesn't have their period, they should disclose it, because that's not fair. And it definitely is a projection of how we feel on the misled front. It's like, well, if I had have known what I was getting myself into, I might have made different choices. So if there's red flags, someone should flag it. And to the defense of people who are influencing others on a fitness journey, and I say this is a tiny little fish because I'm just talking about when I had HA and when I was a personal trainer, I would feel such conflict between teaching people how to eat and exercise, because I would never subject them to things I was doing. It was a very mindful, moderate, healthy choices based protocol, right? Which I would still prescribe now, because they were just simple, easy to follow things. But I was so scared of letting in my truth, because if someone questioned my guidance, and my guidance had actually helped them lose 10 kilos, and it was 10 kilos they needed to lose, Perhaps they didn't even lose any weight. They just started showing up to the gym and feeling good. Or perhaps their skin settled. Like, there was all these different reasons why my voice was helping people, and the idea of letting out something that could make them then question the advice they'd been given made me so sad, like sad to the core, that it felt risky to let anybody in. And later on, I obviously started letting people know, but just it can be really easy when we're in detective mode to feel like everyone's a trickster or everyone's misleading and that's unfair and it shouldn't happen and maybe they should just be kicked off social media. But trying to take the shoes of that person, and again, we don't even know if these people have got eating disorders or not, but let's pretend that there is something going on and they're showing face that this is the way to live. There is quite a pressure that's very human to be like, but perhaps the way I look makes people more receptive to accepting my advice, and my advice changes their life for the better. So it's not as simple as just tell the truth and everyone will be okay, because it might not actually be the balance of things. What are your thoughts on that kind of, just, I guess, the pressure that a lot of people in fitness can feel that isn't being recognized either, because we're so on the defensive of what we've gone through?
I think the finger's being pointed in the wrong direction. We need to be asking the question of, what are the stories in our society that place so much pressure on the presentation of what it is to be healthy? So I was thinking actually earlier in our conversation with the perceptual factors of body image, if you are someone that earns a living based on your appearance, like someone that's an actor or a model or an athlete, like a jockey or a Formula One driver, then you have to keep your weight at a certain level to stay employed, and or keep a certain look to remain employed. Maybe it does become a question at some point whether that continues to be the best industry for you. But if that is your love, and I've absolutely worked with people that in some of those industries where that is their love, that's their calling, that's to say, oh, well, you can't do that anymore because it's made you sick, is almost unsafe, I would say, like almost takes away the whole reason that they would want to get better and stay in the world. We have to be really sensitive about, I think, allowing people to make their own meaning and their own decisions along the way and create their own recovery with the choices and values they have available at the time. And while I would hasten to add that having like a low weight, for example, be a necessity for your work might make recovery technically impossible, that it might be necessary to have a break and then come back. Professional dancers would be another category I'd add to that. That ultimately, if it is really important to you, I do think it's possible to stay well and stay in industries and stay in ways of working that you could be a lighthouse for change as well. Like it's not like if all of us just run for the mountains, nothing's just going to really change. And staying amongst our society and even watering that down a little bit more, I've thought deeply about this because it's really important to me to be authentic and to be congruent with what I say and to live what I preach. And I do enjoy wearing makeup. I do shop in standard clothing shops, and I've really challenged myself about that. And I have so much privilege for the ability to have access to these things. And I know a big part of why I do it is convenience, that I can get to those shops easily and get the clothes I need and get out and I'm done. But if I'm to just put everything else on the back burner and think about dressing myself in the way that supports me to come forward as the woman I want to be and I keep wanting to grow, then these are the clothes that make me feel like that. And possibly that has absolutely been indoctrinated by society, and I've been brainwashed, and I've grown up in this culture, and all of that is very, very likely. But I am not able to completely separate from that either, just like I can't speak another language that I wasn't taught yet. I have to work within the framework of the English language that is my mother tongue. And to some degree, we all also have to work within the framework of some of these structures that might be harmful, but we can't just go and tear down all the scaffolding before anything else is built. And making change amongst the problem can do more good than just abandoning ship and separating so much away from that same conversation that the people that needed to hear us never know our voice.
There's so many things in what you just said there. But just that I guess thinking back to that run to the hills thing, so I don't want anyone thinking in any way, shape or form I need to run to the hills for their recovery. But I have noticed on social media that there tends to be a wave of that, I'm going to be stereotypical here, but like for the gist of it, that 18 to 24 really lean beach body, keep shredding phase. And then there's starting to be this body positive wave. I've got a fuel. I want to grow some big glutes. I want to be healthy, whether cycles attached, eating disorders attached, completely irrelevant. But I'm personally starting to see a wave where you've got the early 20s that are doing the things a lot of us did, who are now 30, and then they're transitioning just the way we did. And then they're coming out the other side much the way we have. And it's actually quite a beautiful movement because, certain things we can't eradicate that, because I can't help but think as well, the timing that some eating disorders fall into place is when we're really young and we're trying to find ourselves and find value. And the easiest value to find is a slim body, because we've seen it on magazines and we've seen it in the movies. And it's quite a simple validation versus going, well, gosh, what career do I want? Do I want to be a mum? Do I want to travel the world? Do I want to buy a house? Do I want to, they're really big and tricky, but hey, I'm just going to put myself first, go to the gym, eat well, got it. It's simplistic compared to other big ordeals that we go through in that transition of 20 to 30. But there is quite a positive response and feedback from women that are sharing the transition, because when we're in detective mode, we think no one wants to share and it's super secret. But when our detective hat comes off and our guard is down, you can actually start to view how many women are sharing this transition and how many women are open about their different struggles, whether it be a disorder or not. And I guess what I'm alluding to is when we're in defensive mode, we tend to only pick out what we want, even if it's a negative thing. But once our guard starts to come down and we can see through a bigger lens, we can start to go, oh yeah, I've seen that wave happen, and then you start to almost warm up to, let's say, the fitness industry again, where it's like, oh, okay, well, depending where I put my focus, I see this, and depending where I put my focus, I see this, and this is lighter and this is nice. And then I guess linking everything we've just said back to that perception piece. At the core of having a good perception of body image, if you want it to be rock solid, it needs to come from your personal, individual, unique values, rather than kind of skipping the details and just trusting, well, Instagram tells me this is the rock and bod, or the movies tell me this is, or even you could apply it to your careers, education, family, houses, anything at all. But try and put your blinkers on and stop looking at what everyone else is telling you should be striving for, and identifying what is most important for you that makes life better and happier and healthier. And your perception of yourself will change. And the best part about it is, if you take that process, is it doesn't matter what comments people give you, because you're too focused on what you're doing. That a compliment's always lovely, of course, and negative feedback's never enjoyable, but it's kind of water on a duck's back because you're so fulfilled with your pursuit versus where you might be right now. And even though you might, quote unquote, think everything's being accepted and you love the path that you're on, secretly, you're always checking who's liked a picture. You're always checking who likes your outfit. You're always checking who agrees with your particular decisions. And sometimes that's really masked. Like you think, no, I'm just goal-driven, process, do it. And then you go, okay, but let's say the world was blind. Like no one could see you. Would you do everything the exact same? Because I think for the people that have found that good balance, if the world is blind, yeah, because I just love what I do. It's really good. I feel good. I look good. I'm productive. I'm showing up as the woman I want to show up as. But if you get brought to that question and kind of go, oh, maybe I would eat a little bit differently. Maybe I would train a little bit differently. Maybe I dress differently. Maybe I only wear pink because, Barbie's screening at the moment. Everyone's wearing pink, but I hate pink. Like it's the smallest of little things. What are your thoughts on that ideal? Just that if you're on suit with your values. No, don't be sorry. That's okay. If you're on pursuit with your values, that everything else is kind of just dust.
And that's a really clear filter to work with. And I really appreciate what you said about how with defensiveness dissolving, we can see the complexity in everything. And when we've been really hurt by something or somebody, it's human nature to globalize that hurt to reduce the risk of a repeat offense, so that rather than us understand that hurt coming from those very specific circumstances, we tend to throw a big net around a whole lot of irrelevant associated factors and say that whole situation, avoid that, because from a survival perspective, that'll give you a better chance of it not happening again. It's like the phrase came to mind. It's like, if a friend's been really hurt by maybe someone they were dating and they're like, I'm off men, I hate men, all men are like never having anything to do with
Devil.
men. They're all of them because of that one guy, they're all out. And it's sort of a good like comic reference point, because we can see, of course, what one person has done and how they've behaved in a relationship does not speak to an entire population. And that's a good reference point to bring into something like the fitness industry, where maybe we were really hurt by how far our obsessive nature took us, or maybe we were given some harmful advice by someone that was in a disordered place themselves that we were training with, or we were reading magazines that were giving biased perspectives on things and not pointing out the harm of taking something too far. And I want to be very clear, like there is harm in every industry.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got every right to be wanting to advocate for more awareness and change. However, it's also really unlikely, just as it's unlikely that all men are bad, it's unlikely that the entire fitness industry is evil, or that the entire fashion industry is evil. And that as we start to heal, things become more nuanced. In fact, that's a really good sign that you're recovering and healing, is that things get more complicated, actually, in a good way. Things get more nuanced. There's detail that starts coming to the surface, and we can see that people are complicated. There's not many, if any, people that are just bad. That people are complicated and hurt, and it can absolutely do horrific damage, but there are stories behind everything, and the willingness to unpack that and see the complexity of that means we actually get more power back, because we get to work within that detail to find a pathway that's right for us, not just throw all these big babies out with the bathwater, so to speak, like entire industries and entire populations of people. that's historically never been helpful.
And just the way you said that, it's like, and I think that's when you really come at home to yourself, is you go through the expelling everybody, and then you go through the awareness of, hang on, maybe things aren't as aggressive as I thought. Now I have the power to actually pick and choose what I want to trust and what I maybe want to debunk, or what I choose, and knowing that that's going to be fluid for the rest of your life as well. Like, it's okay for those opinions to change and shift, and that's kind of the beauty in stepping into your own power and stepping into your own values, is because you're not trusting everybody else to tell you what to do. You're trusting your process to put your best foot forward, knowing that sometimes it's not the best foot, but that's okay, because you've got the awareness to do an audit on it and continue to progress in a way that's going to suit you better.
Exactly.
Jacqueline, I can't believe how time absolutely flies when we speak. Ladies, we actually had 4 different areas of body image to speak about, and we've gotten through one. But with that in mind, that just means we're going to have a lot more parts on body image, which no doubt is necessary, because it's a big topic and it's a fascinating one. It really, really is, because body image affects all of us, eating disorder or not. And it's important to have a really good relationship with that. So Jacqueline, once again, thank you so much for all of your incredible insights. And I'm going to be counting down the days that we continue this conversation and lead into all the other elements of body image, because it's personally one that I really love, because of the details and intricacies of it, and how unique it is to individuals. Like, that's the best part about it. It's your perception. But I'm going to keep waffling, because I'm so filled with joy every time we speak. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jade. I can't wait to talk again as well.
Wonderful. Now, ladies, I'm going to pop all of Jacqueline's details in the show notes as always. So if you would like to connect with her, you can do that in a click of her fingers. But for now, thanks so much for listening, and I can't wait for you to join us in the next one.